Good evening. Hi, Francisco. Hi, Lynn.
Ryan, Lynn?
Francisco, just FYI, Chuck had texted me earlier, so he's out of town. He's not going to be able to join tonight, so I'll take his place for this evening.
Okay. Thanks, Ryan.
Sure.
Francisco, this is Lynn Conway. I'm just checking to make sure there's no feedback.
No, you're perfect, Lynn. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. All right, and we'll wait a couple more minutes to give people an opportunity to arrive. Ryan, we're a couple minutes past. Doesn't look like you have a quorum. I'm not sure if you want to wait a little longer.
Maybe give it another minute or so. I know. Oh, here comes.
There's Dawn. Okay.
Yeah, I think we're definitely gonna need one more commission member. I'm not sure who joined from the unverified number. That person could identify themselves. I just want to see if it's another commission member.
I think that just might be Lynn's phone. Lynn, is that
Oh,
your
her phone.
phone?
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Okay. Yeah, I think you're right. Let's give it another couple minutes. Clifton, I don't know if you heard back from anybody to say they weren't attending. I know Chuck was kind of last minute. I don't know if others had said they weren't able to.
I hadn't heard anything personally.
Okay.
Clifton, what is the PV5 zone?
The Pawcatuck Village zone, the downtown zone.
Okay, thank you.
Clifton, I don't, if we don't get another commission member here in the next couple of minutes, I don't think we have a quorum to be able to proceed, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Right. So if that's the case, is it possible, Francisco, would be able to reschedule? I know obviously tomorrow night won't work. There's a POCD meeting. I don't know if we want to try for next Wednesday. I'm not even sure if there would be availability, Francisco, from your side. I don't know.
Yeah, let me see what I have. I'm certainly willing to do this on another evening if we need to.
Yeah, I apologize.
Yeah.
Not aware. I think maybe with the
So,
long
yeah.
weekend and calendars
Let me check my
get
calendar.
a little skewed.
Yeah, so the 4th, it does appear that I have availability on the 4th.
Okay. And Clifton, the POCD, yeah, that's on is that the 5th, right? June 5th?
June 10th.
Oh, June 10th, even better. Okay. And we don't have our regular, our beginning of the month meeting
Correct.
for P&Z, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Is the POCD meeting, is there a POCD meeting on the 29th tomorrow?
Yes, there is.
And how many commissioners are on that? I forget.
3.
Myself and Elisa are on there.
And Gary.
Oh, and Gary, sorry. Yes, Gary. 3.
Okay, so we can't do, okay.
Yeah, and I have a meeting tomorrow night as well.
Okay.
Francisco, if you don't mind, let's give it to 6:15 just in
Yeah,
case people are running real late.
Yeah, that's
I don't want to
fine.
waste
Yep.
everybody's time, but I'd like to give a chance for others if they can't get on.
No problem. And did we just have Rick join us? Is that one of your commissioners?
No.
Rick's not on the
No.
commission.
No, okay. All right. All right, and Rick, for your benefit, we are waiting until we have a quorum before we begin the meeting, and if we aren't able to assemble a quorum, we might reschedule this.
All right, looks like Alyssa joined, I think.
Okay.
I think with Elisa joining, I think we have a quorum. 3.
Hi,
Hello, good evening.
hello, good evening. Sorry I'm late.
No problem. We're happy you arrived.
Yes. All
You saved the meeting.
right, so Francisco, yep, you can begin.
Okay, hi everyone. We have quite a bit to cover, so I'll jump right into it, and let's take a look at our agenda for this evening. As usual, we'll take a look at where we're at the project schedule, and we're getting close to the end. I'd like to very briefly talk about the outcome of the workshop that we had last month, and for the benefit of those who might not have been able to attend, just an overview of the discussion. Then I'd like to review some of the very minor modifications we made to our recommendations for buffer screening and landscaping requirements. Talk about the lighting regulations. We prepared a recommended amendment for a new lighting section. So we'll take whatever time we need to talk about that. And then we'll get into the new work, which has included kind of a review of the administrative aspects of the regulations, but also combing through the regs from beginning to end. And with Clifton's and Candace's help, they flagged sections that they thought needed some attention. And that includes sections beginning in section 6 all the way through 18. So we have a decent amount to talk about there. There's also a staff recommendation to rezone an area near Cavendish Lane, Elm Ridge Road, and Timber Ridge Road, and I'll walk you through what that involves. And then also talk about EDC recommendations. They provided Clifton with a memorandum of recommendations they have for the Pawcatuck Village 5 zone. And so I'd like to talk about what they've recommended. So with that said, let's get into it. Okay, we're getting close to the end of our work here. Well, my scope of services, at least. There's still a lot of work before you in terms of advancing some of these recommended amendments. Today's meeting, we've got quite a bit to cover. When we meet next month, it's our intention, my intention at least, to go through all of the, and not in detail clearly, but to go through all the recommended amendments, do a brief review that we've prepared to date. And as I discussed with Chuck, is to triage those, decide what you're very comfortable with advancing in the more near term as is currently written and prepared. Figure out at the same time, figure out what might be a non-starter based upon feedback we've received from the community to date or concerns that you may have had when we developed those recommendations. And then identify the things in the middle that might take a little more time or may require a little continued work, but should be advanced. So I think that would be our most productive use of that meeting in June. That would be our final meeting. And then you as a commission, you'd get a break from me over the summer and presumably for a little while. And then it's really a matter of you laying out a schedule for advancing our recommended amendments for adoption. Okay, which, presumably you'd like to, I would imagine you'd like to think about the fall for that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Sounds good.
Good. So let's talk about our workshop. We had a small turnout, but a very good turnout in terms of people that were very engaged, productive, and constructive. And so we walked them through the topic area that we're currently working on: parking, landscaping, buffer area, lighting, signage, all those recent amendments. And we followed that presentation by breaking up into two groups. One group focused on those recommended amendments, those topic areas. And the other group, which I led that group, we provided a review of all the other amendments that had been developed to date, in case anyone wanted to go back and talk about an amendment we developed earlier in the year or last year, or whatever it may be. And we switched up, we rotated so people, if they want to participate in one, they could go and then participate in the other group discussion. And we provided you with, and I believe Clifton distributed a summary report of those findings, but some of the key takeaways was that there was a decent amount of interest in the PV5 zone and making some changes to that. And that was likely just a factor of who we had in the room. But there's definitely an interest, and we hear this coming from EDC as well, to make adjustments to the zoning in the PV5 to lessen the parking requirements, to reduce commercial floor area requirements, and to enable more residential development as a whole on the PV5. There was strong support for the amendments that we've drafted to date for parking, landscaping, buffering. There were a lot of questions as to how things are being changed, and a concern that we would be kind of reducing requirements or repealing requirements. So I think, we did our best to explain to people how things are changing, and that the focus really is on quality over quantity. We talked about lighting standards, and there was a strong interest in the work that we're doing, support for it, and a desire to have those standards be consistent across the town. There is an interest in providing more flexibility for ADUs. We had an architect in the group. She has designed some of these, and she thinks that the regulations are overly restrictive. There was some pushback on our look-back period and freeboard recommendations. This happened at my group where we talked about these prior recommendations. And Chuck, who participated in that group, acknowledged the fact that those are probably the two topic areas or recommended amendments that we've had the most pushback on. That's something we could talk about in June. There's also support for a desire to bring more small lots into conformity. You have a lot of 5,000 square foot or smaller lots in the town, and your smallest zoning district is a 10,000 square foot minimum requirement. And we've talked about this before. We'll delve into that. I've got a slide for that discussion so we can talk about this issue a little bit more. But we talk about a wide range of issues at the workshop, and these are some of the key points that stood out. Any questions about that? Okay, let's keep going. So our buffer screening and landscaping requirements, we've for the most part have moved past this part of the work, and we're now trying to focus on the administrative aspects of the work. But based upon our last meeting and the prior meeting, you did make some requests, and so we did our best to honor those requests. And that really, I think, your main concern or the main area of focus was the buffer area and screening requirements. And while we did not change those requirements with respect to the recommended widths or distances, we did provide a little bit more information in the recommendation in that memo. We provided a table that compares the existing recommended buffer area requirements to the setback requirements so that you could see how they relate to the setbacks. So that was additional information we provided in the memorandum. In addition to that, we provided a recommendation that landscape materials be included in the required maintenance bond. So the maintenance bond is associated with certain projects that require a bond. The maintenance bond is effective for 1 year. Connecticut statute allows them to be 1 year in duration. And we include language that said that all landscape materials shall be included within the maintenance bond to ensure that the maintenance bond can cover replacement of those materials if needed. All right. Any questions on that? And then one other item I do want to note is Chuck had recommended that a landscape architect be required, or a landscape architect certified plan be required for all these landscaping type plans that involve buffer areas. And fortunately, your type 2 site plan requirements do currently require a certified Connecticut registered landscape architect to provide the landscaping plan. And those type 2 site plans are required for any special permit application, any site plan approval application, and really any development of scale. So that requirement is already in place.
That's good.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments on this recommended amendment?
No, I think you've addressed the concerns that I think both the public and some of the commissioners had very well.
And Lynn, I see you have your hand raised. Please go ahead.
Lynn, you're on mute.
Yeah, I just need to unmute your phone, Lynn.
You are still on mute, Lynn.
Let me
You
see
can
if
hear
I
us.
can unmute. See if I can unmute her. No. No, I can't. Can't unmute her.
Put in
Lynn,
the
your
chat.
phone is muted. Okay. Then you may or may not need to hang up and then call back in if you can't. And it looks like she's doing exactly that.
Oh, okay.
All right. I see Carlene joined us. Welcome to the meeting, Carlene. Thanks for joining us. While we're waiting for Lynn to rejoin us, does anyone else have any comments or questions about this recommended amendment? Once again, as I mentioned, we did not make any changes, and based upon my discussion with both Chuck and Clifton, we agreed to maintain those recommended buffer widths. We did not make any changes to that effect.
Lynn, it looks like you've dialed back in. I don't know if you can hear us.
Yeah, Lynn, go ahead.
I can hear you. Can you hear
Okay, we
me?
can hear you. Yep,
Yes.
thank you.
Now we can.
Okay. Thank you. So I just wanted to talk about the public meeting in regards to the buffer requirements. So
Yeah.
you said you did your best to, explain everything, but
Yeah.
what was the uptake, especially when it came to the frontage, as it applies to the memo you prepared? Was anything changed, or can we highlight or look at specifically the frontage so that we can make sure that we've addressed that?
Okay, so when you say the frontage, I'm assuming you mean the frontage strip requirements?
The
For
frontage
park.
buffer requirements, which
Yeah.
was on your previous slide. Yep. Mhm.
Yeah. So the frontage buffer requirement, we still have a buffer requirement. We just don't call it a frontage strip requirement anymore. It's just a buffer. We're just trying to simplify things. So we still have a requirement for a buffer in front of parking lots along the frontage. That requirement's still in place. What we did have at our workshop was some discussion and some requests to also require buffers in the front of the principal structure, like, commercial structure or whatever it may be. And we didn't think that was consistent with the intent of the buffer, which is really to reduce, as Clifton talked about our last meeting, we talked about, is really to reduce nuisance. Parking lots create nuisance, headlights and, all that asphalt is kind of a visual nuisance, and noise from car doors and engines starting and stopping. I'm not sure we agree that the front of a building is a nuisance that should be buffered. So we did not introduce a buffer requirement for the front of principal structures. We do maintain a frontage buffer requirement for parking lots and any other areas of the property that might be a nuisance, like, outdoor storage areas, et cetera.
And how about screening within the buffer?
Yeah. We do also have a screening requirement that is functional within the buffer.
The frontage buffer.
No, not on we don't have a screening requirement on the frontage buffer. There is an option to replace, if you can't provide the buffer of sufficient width, to provide screening as a substitute. But otherwise, if you can provide a buffer sufficient width, there is not a screening requirement along the frontage, if I'm recalling it correctly.
And how did the public feel about that? So in other words, I think I was not at the meeting, but my assumption is that what people would like is landscaping, right? Whether, so it's not just a buffer, but there's grass and some trees, et cetera. I don't know if I would call it visual screening, but landscaping.
Okay.
So do we have, that would be my assumption. Again, I was not at the meeting.
Sorry, I was at the meeting. Sometimes I think I'm at different meetings than people. There was not a consent. There was a lot of talk about the front buffering on the front property line. A lot of discussion about it, and I thought we wanted it.
Yeah, that's what I just explained. There was a desire for a buffer in front of the principal structure. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I misunderstood what you were saying.
And so what I'm trying to explain is that we do continue to require a front buffer in front of a parking lot and other areas that could be a nuisance, but we do not currently require a buffer in front of a principal structure.
But along the front property line.
Correct. Along the frontage. Yes.
Frontage.
Correct.
There was also a lot of discussion at my table about buffering between zones and uses and whether a street counts. Do you remember that discussion?
So I wasn't at that table, Clifton was, but in short, our buffering requirement is between abutting properties.
Of differing uses.
Yeah, or different zones. There is a buffering requirement adjacent a residential zone and also adjacent residential uses.
And what about, and there was a big discussion about streets, whether a street counts as a buffer. You know, if the zone line is down the middle of the street and you have residential on one side and manufacturing on the other. There was a discussion that the street counts as a buffer and they didn't have to buffer the front. Do you remember?
So the requirement would be on the parking lot in that instance and not necessarily on the frontage of the commercial property.
Yeah, that my table did talk about that. That did come up a couple times. The way that the buffers are applied or the right of way does not count as or it contributes to the adjacency, but it's not an abutting property the way that we would identify a buffer. It's not how it's defined. But that did come up a lot for, especially for in the case of pre-existing single-family residences, and then commercial or industrial uses across the street from them.
Yes.
So just to clarify, you've got a single family residence, across the street is a commercial building or some and the parking lot for that commercial building is on the side of the commercial building. So what we're saying is we are not requiring a buffer in front of the building itself, only in front of the parking lot.
That's correct, Lynn. Yes.
Okay, so now that we've had this feedback, are we satisfied with that? Or do we want to say that, no, you need some kind of a buffer in front of a commercial building?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reason we're having these community meetings. Again, I was not there, but it seems as if we need to consider this. And is this something we would think about before we accept this, what we have on the screen here?
If I can, Francisco, and I wasn't at the meeting either, so I'm trying to make sure I understand. It sounded to me like there still is, even with a commercial building, the frontage requires a buffer, correct? But there's not something that has to be directly in front of the building itself. Am I understanding that correct?
Only if it's a parking lot.
Only if it's a parking lot. Okay. So
that's my table discussed this, and it came up both times when we did the circular movement of the groups, and we talked about the buffering in front of a structure. And I only heard it, from a couple people each time. It wasn't overwhelmingly conclusive that was the desire. But when I tried to prod and ask more questions on it, the reason why the buffer was requested in front of the building was it summed up to basically it being ugly, not that it was a nuisance.
No.
And the reason why we have the buffer in front of the parking lot is because the parking lot is more of a nuisance, and the other concerns seem to stem more from architectural design than actual nuisancing. But again, that's what when I prodded, that's what I got out of it. But obviously, Elisa was there both times too, so.
Yeah, I didn't get that. I got that more that it was, the lighting, it wasn't just aesthetics. It was other things that go along with that kind of a building.
Yeah, which I think and hope we would be addressing once we get through the lighting portion, at least for future reference. I didn't get the sense that there was a deep need for it in the way that there's a deeper need for it in front of, say, a parking lot.
Well, let me put it this way. What's to stop us from saying there needs to be a buffer in front of a commercial space? What's the downside?
Yeah, I think you as a commission just need to agree that that's a priority. What is the downside? It may not always be desirable to have a large area of high density landscaping immediately in the frontage of a building. Sometimes the lawn is actually a more preferred type of landscaping.
Yeah, along those lines, I'm just thinking of, sight lines. If you're on a kind of curvy road or something, I'm just trying to picture it. You have buffering there, like you said.
But a buffer is not necessarily screening.
The buffer, so let me distinguish between the two so that there's not confusion. The buffer requirements you have in place right now provide no specification as to what is supposed to be in that buffer, other than it's basically what's not allowed to be there, but no specification as to what should be included, other than some vague references to landscaping. We are, in the course of this work, we're trying to establish a standard that would require the buffer to be comprised of fairly dense landscaping, trees and shrubs, right? That would be the requirement, and other types of ground covers, but not just lawn and not just bare mulch. Screening, and to distinguish that from buffer, screening would be a requirement for something that you can't see through, whether that be through dense evergreen planting, a wall, or fence. So screening is even a higher standard than a buffer. Screening can be located within a buffer. Screening at times can be used in place of being unable to provide the required buffer width. You instead provide a much denser visual barrier in the form of screening. So I just want to make sure we're on the same page as we talk about what these terms mean.
Thanks, Francesco. And I've written it down so it's in front of me. But so what I'm saying is, if the buffer, to have a buffer, I mean, it could be just low shrubs if it's appropriate in front of a commercial building. It could be, dense trees if it was appropriate, but I'm not sure anybody's saying that. What I'm hearing is that they want something. They don't want cement and then the commercial building. They want some type of vegetation. I didn't hear the word screening. I heard buffer. So that's why I'm not really understanding why this would be a problem. It would be a problem if it was screening, but I'm not understanding why it's a problem if it's just a buffer. That's where I'm going here. Could be a couple of azalea bushes. I mean, you know what I'm saying. So I think we got the feedback, and I think we need to consider it and kind of look at, well, why wouldn't we do that? And I'm not hearing a good reason why we wouldn't do it, unless the only reason we're requiring a buffer is because of a hindrance, and I don't really think that's true why we require buffer. I think we require buffer sometimes just for greenery, just to break up the landscape, just to, I have to say, I think this needs to be thought through a little bit.
Yeah, I can say, Lynn, in response, now that we've had the clarity on the screening versus buffering, I don't have a problem with buffering as it's defined.
Yep.
You know, I was thinking more along the screening aspect of it, but since we've clarified that, I'm good with buffering.
Yeah. And I don't think it's that myself or Clifton thinks that this idea is a problem. We're just trying to avoid excessive regulation. But if there's agreement that this is something that is desirable and you would like to see it provided, then we could certainly do that. I think the question is under what conditions. So is the requirement that a buffer be provided for all commercial and industrial uses that have a residential zone across the street? Is that what we're after? Or a residential use across the street?
I mean, the only thing I'll add, Francisco, is again, I was at that table 2 times. I'll say the only people that spoke against or spoke saying we need a buffer in front are residents, and everybody that spoke against that were commercial business owners. So, I mean, that's probably the end all be all run through that you're going to hit if we go through this regulation, is that every commercial entity is just going to request a waiver on it as already is proposed in the text. So, you know, I would call it excessive regulation, but I also would say if the commission agrees to put it through, that every single commercial application is going to be requesting a waiver on it, which is just unnecessary and tedious.
But I disagree, because then I think it's up to the commission to grant the waiver or not. And if we think it's appropriate in that use, then we can make them do a waiver. If we take it out, then we have no recourse.
You do, along those same lines, Alyssa, you do have some authority for special permit applications, at least, to request more of an applicant. You're in a much stronger position, of course, if that requirement is written into the zoning, and then you could provide relief from it. It's certainly much easier that way. But you are afforded through a special permit at least a certain amount of discretion to require more of an applicant.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of the applicant having to ask for a waiver versus the other way around. I just think, you know, if they want it, they have to put the extra effort into it and convince us that a waiver is appropriate.
Along those lines, though, the reduction is already in the proposed text from Francisco, or the reduction waiver, but it doesn't provide any metrics on how to justify whether or not it's sufficient, which just leaves it basically up to each commissioner's subjective taste, which is, again, not what we're trying to do with the regulations.
Okay, so
Yeah.
back to my question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Lynn, sorry. Back to my question. What are we providing the buffer between? So we're providing the buffer in front of commercial industrial properties. Is it just structures, just if there's a building there, or some other form of outdoor activity? And then what are we buffering that from? Is it a residential zone across the street? Is it a residential use? Is it both?
I think we might need to think about it a little more. And to Clifton's point,
I wonder if anyone has a gut
you don't want to leave
feeling
it
on
open to it where, you know, you don't want to leave it open where there would be distance, you know, like different commissioners thinking different distances or lengths or sizes of the buffer. So I think we would probably want to come up with something that the group could agree to. And I don't know if right now we have all the parts ready to do that, but you know, I lean more towards your residential area, using that as a demarcation line. I think that makes sense to me.
But I just, again, why would we limit it? Like, why wouldn't we just have a buffer in front of the lot? I'm just
Define,
not.
I guess my question is, when we say buffer, is that 5 feet, 10 feet? I mean, I think that's where the question is, where Clifton brought it up. Okay, a buffer to you, Lynn, might be 10 or 20 feet. To someone else, it might be 5 feet. I don't know. So I think that's kind of the specificity that we would have to have.
But don't you think that has to do with the scale of the development? I mean, really, that's something for the commission to assess. As I don't know.
Then it just makes it subjective.
Yeah, I think that's.
Lynn, are you suggesting that all commercial or industrial uses, even if there's another commercial use across the street, each of them should have a buffer in front? Is that what you're suggesting, that they should be just being required in front of all commercial uses?
Well, I personally think, yes, there should always be some greenery surrounding buildings and lots. I mean, I do. And I think for the most part, we've done a very good job of that in Stonington as is. Even, I do think there should be on the frontage. I mean, we don't want
we
this
need to work on this. I think this needs a lot of some more looking at.
Okay, I just need to get adequate direction from all of you so that I can get to work on it. So I appreciate your patience as we probe it, but I need to get an idea where you want to go so I can come back to you with a proposal.
My thought, Francisco, obviously others will weigh in, is I think to look at it from a frontage with a residential in front, that makes sense because and I do think we need to come up with, maybe there's some kind of uniform buffering size or definite, however that works, just something that's defined so it's not so open to an interpretation, I guess, or subjective interpretation.
And I think that we should look at it across the board. What if it was mixed use? What if the building across the street was mixed use? I think those people are living there, and that's why I think you've got to look at it across the board. I agree that there needs to be some parameters as to how much, but I don't see that we should limit this in any way. I don't know. Alyssa, what do you think?
I agree. I mean, I think that we're jumping at this. We're trying to make it easy, but this isn't an easy thing. And we need buffering around things. And I mean, I said before in the public meeting that if you have a manufacturing building across the street from a house, they need buffering. It's not, it's the lighting, it's the looks, it's everything. And I think we just need a lot to look at this more carefully. So I would like to see more concrete. I don't know what the word is. When you say you don't like the ambiguity of it, so let's make it less ambiguous.
Yeah, I agree. So I think certainly make it less ambiguous, but I think it has to go across the board, not just across from a residential zone. There's no downside to having greenery. There's no downside.
No.
But again, we're not talking screening here. That is not what we're talking. So.
Okay. All right. I think I have sufficient direction from you, and I'll take that, and then we'll come back. We'll send out something in advance of our meeting next month for you to take a look at, and then we'll spend a little bit of time next month talking about it because we've just used up about a third of our meeting today, and we've got a lot to cover next month. But we'll get you something revised that responds to your concerns. Okay.
Thank you, Francisco.
Sure. All right. Let's keep things moving. All right, sign regulations. We agreed to make some very minor changes to our recommended amendment, and that includes not exempting campaign signs, keeping your regulations as they are currently written, but just renaming them from political campaign signs to campaign signs, because these can be used for a referendum as well, which is not necessarily a political election. And then we provided a little more description about how sign illumination should be measured, and we provided a graphic to help show how that should be measured. Otherwise, we did not change the illumination regulations. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah,
I've been, the weather's really nice and I've been like running around a lot.
Yeah.
And those, you have the yard signs, and I know we can't do content specific, and I don't mind them for elections, but they are all over the place.
Yeah, a lot of graduation ones right now, I imagine.
No, it's not graduation. It's Henderson Roofing. It's Christmas light removal. It's, this, that, and the other thing. How do we get rid of those?
Well, we can't get rid of them.
I mean, not get rid of them, like.
Yeah, so
the signs I mean, that with the wire thing, and they are there's pest control one I saw today, and
so what your regulations currently require is that those be pulled up a certain amount of time after the work's completed. What we're moving towards is a restriction of only 2 of those types of signs per property. And that would include if you had a real estate sign out there, for sale sign or contractor sign, you get 2 of them. And you get 2 per year, and that's it. You can't have a sign up longer than a year.
Okay, because these aren't contractor like building signs. These are permanent these are advertisements.
Yeah. So your zoning enforcement officer has the authority right now, as your regulations are currently written, to request those be pulled up. Okay. And they will continue to have that authority underneath our proposal, even though it's content neutral and we don't call out a pest control company sign or anything like that.
Yeah.
They will continue to have that authority because we limit the number of signs per yard and the duration of signs, the duration that they can be out. So there is a control that will be enforceable.
So, Francesca, what happens when it's along Route 1 and it's not, it could even be within the state, buffer, because Route 1 is a state road, I think. So how does it work there? And can we put something that would regulate that corridor?
Well, the state can pull those up whenever they want. Of course, they're not going to bother with that stuff.
Right.
They're supposed to have an encroachment permit. So it may be that the zoning enforcement officer could send a notice, that the sign should be removed unless an encroachment permit from the state can be provided. And that might be one way of enforcing it. I'm not sure how to.
She just pulls them up as she drives by.
Or just does it herself.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure Candy doesn't want to go around with an encroachment enforcement. Okay.
Yeah.
She does it.
Yeah, and I think that's where we see a lot of those signs. So, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else on this? All right. Let's advance. Lighting recommendations. So I presented you last month with the options, best practices for dark sky lighting. And so we drafted a recommended lighting section that would replace your existing lighting section, which is extremely minimal. It's 12.47. There's really not much to it. And so we expand upon that by providing certain exemptions. So we identified types of lights that can be exempted, like anything public safety related, and anything under a certain luminance or wattage, basically the equivalent of a 60-watt bulb. Anything less than that, exempted. We identify a list of prohibited lighting. We provide outdoor lighting standards for all uses and all zones. So that's the consistency that was asked for at our workshop. It's applicable to all uses across all zones in the same way. Includes parking lot, sidewalk, and standards for other areas. And then we also provided the athletic field and activity lighting regulations and the boat launch and dock lighting recommendations that we discussed last month. What we did not provide, and Lynn, I expect that you're going to have a response to this. We did not provide any regulations regulating the interior lighting of buildings. This is all applicable to exterior lighting based upon enforceability through zoning and by the ZO. So we did not provide standards for like time on, we talked a little bit like about automatic shut-off lights and timered lights and laboratories and classrooms and that sort of thing. We did not include any of that. Cliff and I both thought that'd be really messy to try to enforce through zoning. But what we have is improves upon your existing lighting regulations 10 times over. So with that said, Lynn, I know you do have concerns about interior building lighting. And I don't know if you want to weigh in on that.
I do, and thank you. You knew I was going to say something. So what about instead of calling it interior building lighting, we require a certain type of window if it's just, within a certain distance from the water.
Okay. Clifton, you have any thoughts on like a glazing requirement for waterfront properties?
We don't provide any of those type of design standards in any other capacity, so it'd be weird to start there. But I think if we did develop some architectural design standards in the future, that'd be a great place to put it.
But we have to start somewhere, and there's nothing prohibiting us from putting it in here, right? And then we could incorporate it later on into the architectural standards. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, so Lynn, you raised a really good point. Like, is there anything prohibiting us? And I don't think we would be non-compliant with our authority through statute, because this is arguably a nuisance type of issue, and also an environmental issue. So I think there's probably solid ground to stand on through your zoning authority, because it's not for aesthetic purposes. So we're not, we don't have an issue with the architecture and the way that the lighting appears due to some design or architectural reason. So I think you're probably on solid ground to institute that. But as Clifton points out, it would be an outlier within your zoning regulations. Otherwise, you really don't get into building materials for structures. So I think we can include it, but it just needs to be a standard that you can enforce. Now, it's obviously only going to be enforceable upon new construction. We'd have to write into the site plan requirement. You do have a requirement in your site plans for architectural drawings. We obviously have to provide that specification that certain type of, detail sheet would be provided, or specification be provided along with the site plan architectural drawing submission.
My only comment is
we have a lot of coastal building going on now, both commercially as well as residentially. And we're talking about potentials on the river as well as all along the Fishers Island coast. I just think that once you lose that, even if it's, one building, right, then it affects the rest. It affects that coastline. It has a major effect even if it's not a complete build out, even if it's just a 20% build out, you know. And so I think this is a opportunity that we should grab. And
so let's talk about that. Clifton, what were your thoughts? What did you want to get in there?
My comment is that the glazing requirements are regulated by residential and commercial building codes, and the building official is the one that goes out and regulates and determines whether or not the window that is installed in any project is up to the code. So that code and its requirements trump anything that we put into the regulations. So if anything, incorporating this requirement would need considerable review from the building department. I wouldn't want to put anything in just for zoning's sake, especially if it violates building code.
Well, can we look into that?
Which is why I said I think as part of an architectural design design guidelines that makes more sense. At this time, I don't think we have the time or the capacity to look into that.
Yeah, I just think this is a big win for zoning. I really do, and I think it's a golden opportunity that needs to be grabbed. And if it requires a little more work, it requires a little more work. I think this is one of those things that if you don't do it now, there's no sense doing it ever. You know, you just need one more hotel to go up on the river. You just need, you know, the big, you know, some of these larger lots, you know, to move forward with some development, and you've lost it all. So I personally think that this is a big win, and it definitely is in alignment with our whole coastal resilience, which we have spent a lot of time and effort on. And I'd just like to see us put it in and, you know, give it a try.
All right, Lynn, I think we know where you're coming from. I'll discuss with Clifton, see what our options are. Okay?
Okay.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions on the proposed lighting regs? Okay, I'll keep things moving. All right. So let's get to some new content. And as I mentioned, Clifton and Candace took some time going through the regs just top to bottom, just trying to flag things that they thought needed attention before we finish our work. One of those being amplified entertainment. We did significantly improve these regs in phase 1. However, they are limited to restaurants and liquor sales places, which is as they were written before we made improvements to these. It's my understanding, based upon what Clifton's told me, however, that it's common practice to allow amplified entertainment for other types of uses. It isn't just limited to restaurants and liquor sales places. So my question for you is, should we just get rid of that restriction or condition and just leave it open to other types of uses?
Can you go over that again?
Yeah, amplified entertainment. So that would be, you know, a band playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As the regulations are written, that sort of amplification for a performance is only permitted accessory to a restaurant or some other venue that serves liquor. And so the question, and it's my understanding the practice has been that this has been allowed for other uses other than restaurants or liquor sales places. And so should we change the regulations to reflect the fact that it's obviously been desirable to allow these for other uses by removing that stipulation that it be limited to restaurants and liquor sales places?
I think we need to look at zones maybe
Well, presumably we'd limit it to commercial zones.
Well, then we need to put that in, I mean,
Yeah. But yeah, let's talk about it. Like, do we want to allow these for other types of uses? And then what would the conditions be? Would it, as Lissa points out, would it be limiting it to commercial zones?
let's try to think of some examples of like a different use that would have amplified entertainment. That's not a restaurant.
Well, I can name one right now, and that would be a graduation party in somebody's backyard.
That's like, right, so that's a personal.
No,
Yeah,
I'm just
that's
saying
not
temporary.
for different use. So yeah, I'm just saying that's
This would be
one.
accessory, like a regular practice where they have a little
Okay.
bit of infrastructure built out for it, and it's
Okay.
common. So I could think of like some sort of venue that maybe they don't serve food or have a liquor permit.
Like like the pavilions at the high school.
Yeah.
Sure.
And the nurseries sometimes have, events on them where they have amplified music. I've seen some festivals or something like that.
Yeah.
But
A farm.
This is for more than 2 days per calendar year.
Yeah.
So if someone just had it 1 day a year, grand opening, graduation, I don't know, it doesn't apply at all
Yeah.
to any.
Right, it's
That's
not an
right.
accessory
We're not
use.
talking
That's
about
just a
those.
one-time shot, but
Yeah,
something
we're
that's
not
gonna
talking
use
about
this
those.
as they're gonna
Yeah.
have this as a part of their business.
Correct.
Potentially.
That's what we're
Access
talking
to it.
about. Yeah.
So basically, if we made it for everybody, right, it becomes more restrictive for everybody because they have to follow all of these rules.
Only if they do it more than
No.
2 days.
No,
Yeah, Lissa, thank you, Lissa. Yeah, only if it's more than 2 days a year. Correct.
but it does limit that, right? But the limitation is anything more than 2 days a year, then that's where it's.
Correct.
But if you don't make it for everybody, to your point, Ryan, if somebody had 10 graduation parties a year at their house, then none of this, there's no regulations regarding it at all.
That's kind of how I would read it, yeah.
Well, and not necessarily true because we do identify amplified entertainment as an accessory use, and it is only permitted currently in commercial and industrial zones.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so everyone else has to kind of fly under the radar and be a good neighbor.
Yeah.
And it is a special use permit is required. So it's not a zoning permit. It's a very high standard, but it is within those zones, and it's not allowed in the CS5, the M1, or the LI30, but all the rest of the commercial zones. Within those zones, all these conditions apply. And however, it's limited to restaurants and liquor sales establishments.
I think it gives us more authority if we take that language out, right? Take the restaurants and liquor sales only part out and apply it to
That's what he wants to do. He wants to take that out.
And that's where I think
Exactly.
that's where I would prefer to go.
Exactly. I mean, I
need-
really don't think you would have a windfall of applications from, like retail
grocery store.
outlets, grocery store, exactly. But if the practice has been that this has been allowed in association with other uses, then we should just be consistent with what's been working.
Yeah. I think that makes sense to me.
Okay. All right. Let's keep
Let
moving.
me just read this a little bit more. So,
Yeah.
I mean, they'd still need a permit from us because this would be an accessory use. So is there anything
special
like it
use-
needs to be,
Special use
I always
permit,
think
yeah.
about sort of my go-to now on this amplified music thing is things like that new wedding venue we just allowed. So we could say like it has to be inside. Like outdoor amplified music is different than inside amplified music. And is that not here, right? I mean, it could be, this could be.
We don't, I don't believe we have any condition requiring it to be inside. We do have a lot of conditions. We have a requirement of a noise and vibration analysis be conducted by a qualified sound engineer.
I mean, well, it sort of says soundproofing. I mean, okay, I think C is kind of stupid, actually. I mean, like a qualified professional sound engineer. I mean, come on.
Yeah, those are your existing regulations.
Yeah.
And
I think sometimes they're,
Yeah.
What does B have to do with amplified music? It's about graffiti and litter.
I think there was some concern that amplified music attracts, I don't know, unsavory crowd, and you want to
It seems like they're thinking this is like at the park out there, like, Taste of Mystic. Where people are like drinking and then throwing their stuff out.
Yeah, I think the graffiti part's really strong. I kind of get the trash litter part, particularly if it's outside. I think the graffiti part's really kind of strange.
Yeah, I'd almost take the graffiti part out and put out signs or anything associated. That kind of seems more like what they were talking about, flags or banners or something like that.
Well, which your sign regulations already address.
Okay.
And it has security measures.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
A little bit of a mishmash here.
Yeah.
It certainly seems like a mishmash. I mean,
these regulations are bad. Like even D, I don't like the way D is written. Like we can decide, we can reopen it. Are you allowed to reopen a special use permit?
There's a lot of messiness involved in that.
Right, I mean, is that even a legal thing to haul them back in?
As you correctly point out, if they're non-compliant, if they're in violation of the permit, then potentially. But as you correctly point out, there's a lot of messiness here. All right, so how about we do this? We strike restaurants and liquor places, and then we clean this section up. How's that?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I don't think legally, once they have a permit, you can reopen it just because someone complains.
That's not the right terminology. This is really, it should be about enforcement.
Yeah.
And I agree. Reopen is very poor choice of words. Yeah.
Yeah. I did go to the land use law court all day seminar,
okay.
But I don't think that's illegal. I don't think you can legally do that.
I think as written, you're exactly right.
Yeah, let's clean this one up.
Okay, and let's also.
I mean, I'd like to see, just in terms of what I'd like to see that it needs to be, inside or something.
Well, then and let's not take a lot of time to talk about this, but do you really want to require this inside? I mean, there may be conditions where this is very appropriate to be outside,
well,
depending on the context.
Yeah, that doesn't.
Or something. I mean, some way to, you can just clean it up. I mean, because there are places under like those floating zones, right? Like the Dean's Mill Farm has it outside. They get that under their floating zone. And the wedding venues
like a
and
brew pub with a big outdoor dining area, and they have a band set up.
Wineries.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we need to clean it up. I've got it. We'll do that, and we got a lot more ahead of us, and it's already past 7. Okay, section 11, your lot standards. All right, this is really important because this ties back in discussions that we had at length multiple times months ago. This issue of undersized lots across the town. 11.2, this is an existing regulation, is like a Band-Aid that's trying to heal this problem you have with the hundreds of non-conforming lots across town due to lot size. The way this regulation works is that it says that if your lot's non-conforming with lot size, and it was existing as of 1960 when this regulation was written, that what the zoning officer or the commission could do is basically zone the lot according to the next smallest zoning district that it conforms with. So if you're in the RA 20, then you would zone it as if it were in the RA 15 or whatever it may be. and apply those standards, which is, it's really messy and unconventional to apply standards from a different zoning district to a lot in another zoning district. And I really don't know how effectively this has been used. It may be that these go to ZBA and ZBA just points to this, says, well, yeah, we'll give you some relief under this section. A couple of the issues are, first, it's trying to solve a problem. It's a Band-Aid on a problem. It's kind of messy in the way it's applied. It only allows for single family development. That's it. That's all you can do. It doesn't apply to commercial lots, doesn't apply to, townhouse or two family. It only provides relief to allow for single family development. So the question is, should we revisit this, rewrite it, and come back with an approach that would also apply to commercial or mixed use properties? And so before we get into that discussion, let me show you one way I think we could approach this that does change things, but it might be a better solution. So we would instead, and I glazed over one aspect of it, is adjacent undersized lots. And it basically says if you are the owner of two lots and one of them's undersized or they're both undersized, you can't use this provision. You need to combine them into a conforming lot. So that's what that is. So we would maintain that. So the way we'd handle is that we'd just simplify it. We would say lots existing as of some date in 2025, whether unimproved or improved, so whether there's a house on it or it's an empty lot, that are smaller in area than the minimum lot size requirement for the zone where located, shall be considered conforming with respect to lot area, but shall remain subject to all other applicable standards of the regulation. So you'd have the same setback requirements. Right now you have a floor area requirement. We proposed coverage requirements. All those other height requirements, all those other standards would still be in place, frontage. This would just provide relief from the lot size, which is, I think, the biggest constraint for most of these properties. And so this would be applicable to all types of properties across the town in all zones and for any use. But unlike the regulation that exists right now, the regulation that exists right now provides relief from lot area and also would reduce the setback requirements and frontage requirements to the next smaller lot district size. That's the way it works right now, and I don't know how effectively that works. But I do know from our previous discussions that there were a lot of concerns about reduced setbacks and frontage requirements and that sort of thing. So this would keep all those standards in place, but just take the lot area requirement off the table for those non-conforming lots, while continue to require that if you do own two lots that are next to each other and one or both are non-conforming, that you need to assemble them into a conforming lot. So you don't get a pass on that. Okay, and this would obviously prevent, this would obviously prevent the subdivision because the lots need to be existing. You can't subdivide down to something smaller.
Right.
And what if they've been paying taxes as one lot, but never, because we've had that come up a number of times where, the land cards, they've been taxed. And how would it apply to this?
So if they had two properties and it's been taxed as, they had two parcels and it's been taxed as one lot, is that what you're saying, Lynn?
Yeah.
Well, if they did build on the second one, then it would become a separate lot and it would be taxed separately. So there'd be a tax for each one individually.
Okay. I mean, we've definitely had some issues with this. What is my question to you is, and I don't know off the top of my head, but what uses
Yep.
do we have that are subject to lot size and not zone?
Well,
Because you said all uses.
So all of your uses are in a zone that has a lot size requirement. And if I go back to existing 11.2, this only provides relief for lots that you could build a single family residence on. So this would not be applicable in commercial or industrial zones unless you're allowed to build a single family residence in those zones. So this only provides relief for the construction of a single family residence. What we're proposing is to be agnostic as to what is built there, just let whatever is allowed in the zone be built. But otherwise, we would maintain all the other standards, setback and frontage requirements, et cetera.
Yeah.
Francisco, I personally like this as it maintains all the setbacks and the buffer and the height requirements. I'll say that it would drastically reduce the number of variances applied for solely because of lot size.
But you can't grant a variance because of lot size.
Well, you can if the applicant demonstrates that it's a hardship for whatever reason. You know, they need to successfully demonstrate that. It's much harder to get a variance for use. Really, the ZBA isn't supposed to delve into that at all. But an applicant could successfully argue that, you know, their lot was created before the zoning was applied, that the zoning's is unreasonable given that the lot was created before, and that could be a basis for a variance. Or if they have an existing structure that was built and approved, but the lot, because they're in nonconformity with the lot size, they would otherwise not be allowed to do an addition or something. That could be a solid grounds for a variance. But that's an unnecessarily complicated procedure.
Yeah, and I mean, because I was on the ZBA and just if you're non-conforming and whatever there is there, but then to ask for an extension, an addition, and is not, we don't give variances for that.
Yeah.
Got nothing. It's you get a variance if you have a mountain in the middle of your lot and you need to move it over 5 feet.
You have to demonstrate a hardship. Yep.
Right. And that's certainly not a natural hardship. That's a man-made hardship.
You're right. You're right. Which is why we want to avoid that process if possible.
Yeah, this doesn't change that process, Lon.
Yeah, this keeps it from going to ZBA for that type of appeal. Yeah.
Now, if they wanted to go back to ZBA for setback,
the setback, that's another
setbacks, height, that's a completely different thing. This just eliminates it if it's solely based off lot size. So if you're 1 square foot short, which I actually have seen in a couple instances.
Yeah.
This gives relief from that, or at least an option for relief.
Yeah. And there is precedent for this in Connecticut. I'm currently working with Town of Old Lyme right now to rewrite their regs. Very similar process as to what we've gone through with you. And they have a regulation similar to this that provides relief for existing undersized lots.
I feel like it's okay for single family homes. I don't feel like it's okay for everything across the board. So I mean, I feel like that needs to go in front of a board and have it discussed on an individual basis. And if it's the ZBA, then they have to determine on an individual basis.
Well, we don't get use
I just think it's
variances. It
kind of,
can't.
yep.
Well, Lynn, though, I mean, if you think about it, most of your uses, if it's some sort of commercial or mixed use, I mean, most of those require either a site plan application or a special permit, which means they do come before you.
Yeah, but it's like we were saying earlier, the whole special use permit thing versus, or asking for a waiver, whatever, is very different from, it's not allowed, you know, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's very different. And I think this board and all the boards I have been on are very much, oh, well, it's special use permit, you know, that means we should do it kind of thing versus we need to justify not doing it. I think it should be the other way around for this when it's all the various uses.
But Lynn, we
I
can't.
like the way, yeah, go ahead.
We can't give use variances even through ZBA. So
Right.
if it's you can't be selective based off the use, or you can't say yes or no because it's this use. That's why we have the special use permit process.
Yeah, I mean, we could restrict these to zones, but I'm really not sure why we would provide relief in a residential zone and not in a commercial zone.
Yeah.
You know,
And the vast
an
majority
applicant, yeah, a project is it's gonna need to still meet the setback requirements, frontage requirements. They're gonna have to provide whatever landscaping that you require them to provide. They've got to provide their parking, access. There's a lot of other things they need to do on a lot that are going to control what they could do with that lot. And if a lot is truly undersized, then it just won't be feasible for development.
if you look at the
that's a good point. It's a good point. I don't know. What do you think? What do you think, Melissa? What do you think? What do you think?
I'll just add, if you look at the historical platting of all of these historic downtowns and Pawcatuck specifically, the vast majority of those parcels are undersized even for PV5. So, I mean, this would really apply mainly to that section of town, which has more of the historical platting. A lot of the downtown Mystic area does align with the RH10 zone, but the old historic PV5 and RH10 over on the Pawcatuck side doesn't align.
Okay. Yeah, and we're really trying to help them develop. We're really trying to help develop that, you know, the Pawcatuck neighborhood zone. So.
And I don't think it's going to come up that much.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, you've convinced me. I'm okay.
Okay, well, let's move forward. We'll prepare a recommended amendment to this effect. And I really think this is going to improve things. It might address some of the issues we talked about earlier with some recommendations we had for rezoning to try to address the lot size nonconformities. And it may be that this is an adequate solution and you don't have to go down the road of some of those other recommended amendments.
Okay.
Okay. All right, let's move on. Paper Street. So Paper Street, it's a street that shows up on the map. It's been an approved road. It's been plotted, but it hasn't been built. And it's a right of way. As the regulations are currently written, if you have a lot on that Paper Street, you can't build until the street's constructed. There's kind of, I think there has been in the past some waivers of that requirement. And the question is, should we just write that into the regulations to allow the DPW director, town engineer, whomever it may be, to waive this requirement for single-family residential uses?
I agree.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Okay, good. That was fortunately an easy one.
We like to
All
throw that to you every once in a while.
Throw me a bone, huh? All right. 12.3, historic and cultural resource sites. So you have a very interesting regulation, and I appreciate Clifton bringing this to my attention. That basically says that if you tear down a structure that's on the town's cultural resource inventory, which includes some or a National Register structure, and if you tear that down, basically you don't get to receive any density considerations for the project. And so it's kind of a punitive measure. So let me talk about what authority the town does and does not have regarding demolition of structures. First of all, you do have a demolition delay ordinance, which requires someone, they can't just pull a permit and tear it down the next day. So that's a municipal ordinance. It's not in the zoning regs, but it requires 90-day period or whatever it may be, and then demolition can occur. And that's intended to buy time for someone to come to the rescue and buy and salvage the property, or say, hey, I'm willing to buy it and we'll move it. That's what that's intended for. That's outside of a local historic district, even for a National Register property or a property that's on your cultural resource inventory, which really statutorily means nothing. It's just a list that you made. You don't have the authority to restrict demolition. Your authority is limited to that demolition delay. And it's also not a common practice and really not supported in statute, your ability to be punitive by removing rights because someone exercised the rights that they have under statute, which is to demolish a structure, consistent with your demolition delay ordinance. So we need to dial this back and remove any language about density considerations being removed if the structure is raised, and instead just point to your demolition delay ordinance to make sure it shows up on the radar in your zoning. And that's what I would recommend. Okay, any questions or comments?
I would say that makes sense to me with your,
Yeah, you're just well outside your authority with this regulation.
Yeah.
I think this was this might have been in response to when they tore down that historic building.
Yeah, it likely was. And I do think
I think it might have been a knee-jerk reaction to that because the town was pretty pissed off about that.
Yeah. I do think it's important to point to your demolition delay ordinance in the zoning regs just to make sure it gets flagged. But that's about where your authority ends. All right. Okay, good. All right. Next. Building spacing. So this is buildings on a common property. We're not talking about buildings on separate properties. So setbacks aside, for a development where you have multiple buildings, you require a 20-foot spacing. Should we allow the fire marshal, and that's usually done for fire hazard purposes, but also for aesthetic purposes, whatever, light, whatever it may be. But there's some instances where 10 or 15 feet makes total sense for the design. So the question is, do we want to write in a provision to allow the fire marshal to approve a lesser distance, or to give you the authority to approve a lesser distance provided the fire marshal is in agreement?
I like option 2 better.
Yeah, I mean, most of these would come through as site plan or special permit approval. I mean, there's almost no instance where there would be an administrative approval of multiple buildings on a property.
Yeah.
But would this be for an ancillary building as well?
Yeah, Yep, potentially not just principal structures, but also potentially an accessory structure, correct?
So I disagree based on that.
Well, let me take that back. The regulation as is currently written is between primary structures, principal structures. All right, I take that back. And I'm not suggesting we change that.
So between principal structures, so give
Yep.
me an example. Could you give me an example?
Yeah,
Let's
say you have a multifamily development and it's got 3 buildings on the site. Each building has, I don't know, 12 units. Currently, what your regulations require is that those buildings be no closer than 20 feet. This would say that you could lessen that standard, provided you, the commission, agreed to it, and the fire marshal also agreed. There may be some instances
I don't agree with this at all. Yeah. No, I don't
agree.
Some
instances where you really don't need 20 feet. There's just no particular need for it. There may not be windows on that side of the building, the way it's oriented to the sun, that might not preclude light from getting in. You could still get plenty of light and have landscaping. And if the fire marshal has plenty of access, it could be a non-issue.
Francisco, let me, so the reason why I pointed this one out was the regulation as it stands allows the commission to override the authority of the fire marshal and the building official, who are both set to regulate the fire distances between structure through both fire code and building code. I don't think the commission or zoning regulations should have the authority to override those individuals, since this regulation does, or since our regulations don't apply to them. They have their own codes that they manage.
Yeah.
So this allows the fire marshal to say, well, according to fire code, this is okay. And and the building official, well, according to building code, they're meeting the requirements. So that's point one. Point two is the way that this language is phrased too in the cases of downtown zones like the DB5 or the PV5, where you have 0-foot setback. The way it's written would apply over the property line. And so that way a building could be encroaching up, or the building being built first in one location could encroach on the other building or the other lots setback requirements or their allowances, basically creating this domino cascading effect. And so I think it both needs to be strict. It needs to be, clarified that it ends at the property line, and two, that the proper personnel that have the expertise to make these decisions can basically decide rather than the commission.
But Clifton, your whole thing about the fire marshal has to do with fire, and I mean, that may not be the sole reason that this is there.
Right.
And two, this says located on the same property. So, if it's in a zone, it doesn't matter what was built first. It's located on the same property. It doesn't matter what your neighbor did. So
I clarify in the case of the two multi-ownership of different lots, then especially in the case that we are talking about if they're not adequately sized to the zone, they have to be combined. Where, as you said on the property card, it's still 2 properties, but it's one owner and it's thereby combined. So it provides a murkiness that I'm uncomfortable with, and I'd rather just clarify it. And then since it's saying, providing access through by emergency vehicles, that's the fire marshal. Or that's specifically the fire marshal, because they have to get access to sides of the building. So if they can get around in a lesser size than 20 feet, then they should be able to be the ones to make that decision.
So how much of this, I mean, tell me do we allow 2 primary structures everywhere? We don't really, right?
Yeah, we do now.
So I could have 2 houses on my lot.
You can have the ancillary dwellings.
Yeah, in the case of most commercial uses specifically, you can have multiple structures doing,
Multiple
one
things.
or 2 primary uses, especially in the case or in, commercial zones. In the case of residential, Lynn pointed out the big one, which is ADUs.
Yeah.
And
But
then we
also
get into
So-
a fuzzy,
agricultural uses too.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think in residential, we get into kind of fuzzy area with this wording because the ADU I would consider to be an accessory structure, not a primary structure. And that's
Right. It's an accessory
typically we like
dwelling,
to
yeah.
use principal and accessory structure, and primary is a little fuzzy. Really should be a principal structure, but
Principal structure.
yeah. So what do we need to achieve with this if we are to make changes to it? It's Clifton, I'm hearing you want to ensure that the fire marshal approves. You're
Well, I think the way you phrased it, the second option where
yeah,
the commission can approve a lesser distance, obviously based off of the fire marshal and building official.
okay.
Yeah, maybe.
But I don't think the commission should be the preeminent authority on building spacing. It should be those that have the expertise to do so, which are the building official and the.
Unless the commission doesn't want to see,
Yeah.
in general, a lot of buildings very close together on the same lot.
Yeah, I don't
Which
think
is
it's necessarily a
yeah.
fire issue across
Yeah.
the board.
So
By
I'm
by
okay
saying-
with, yeah, go ahead.
I was saying, by saying, by limiting how far away the buildings can be from each other, that could restrict how many buildings you get on the lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that could be something we want to think about instead of, like Lynn said, instead of saying like, oh, as long as you have 20 feet, you can put you could put 5 feet between buildings and smush them all in there. And I know there's, the FAR and all that sort of stuff, but
Yeah.
it is more than just a safety issue.
Yeah.
So do we
To
need
some
to touch
degree.
this at all then?
I don't think so.
I agree. No, I would leave it.
I don't think there's any reason to touch it.
Clifton, if we don't change this in any way, do you see that as not solving a problem that you need to solve?
No, it just seems counterintuitive to me. But if the commission doesn't want to change it, then let's not change it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd rather leave it.
Me too.
All right, let's keep going. All right. Refuse containers.
Oh,
So here, all right, dumpsters, compactors. We don't allow them in the setback. And sometimes there are instances where they end up being located in the setback. There are many instances where the setback's really the best place. So can we, instead of prohibiting them in a setback, can we, I don't know, prohibit them in a buffer area or put some other sorts of restrictions on them?
I like the no
requires-
frontage, not in the front,
Well, that would obviously still
as you
apply.
stay,
Yeah.
I'll tell you right
Yeah.
now with these garbage cans all over town, this is like, whatever, put a dumpster. That's all you see now when you drive around town is garbage cans. I hate it.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's my little rant on garbage
No,
cans.
it's okay.
'Cause,
It's all right.
we're going through all these regulations to make the town look pretty, and literally you drive down the street and all you see is trash cans. It's our new garbage hauling system, Francisco.
Yeah.
And people leave them in the sidewalks. I would like to see, like, that's a whole
Yeah,
different issue. They don't
yeah.
take them in, they're in the sidewalks, they just sit out there the whole time.
So I have to tell you, yeah, and I agree with you wholeheartedly about the new garbage.
They're so
can.
ugly. It's ruining the look of the town.
This is for residential.
It's for anything. No.
As well as commercial.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I have to tell you, I mean, especially we're decreasing a lot of the setbacks. And
Not the setbacks. No, we're not decreasing setbacks. Buffer areas. I don't want to confuse the two. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't want to confuse the two.
But this says,
yeah,
we have decreased setbacks. When we rezone, when we went through our zones, we definitely have
okay.
decreased.
Presuming those were to move forward, you're correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, and then we're saying, so we've decreased them, and in some tight spaces we've decreased them, and now we're saying, oh, but and also you can put your trash in the setback as well. I could see in tighter neighborhoods, I could see this as being really a problem. The size of your garbage, I mean,
Even if kept out of any required buffer, in which admittedly buffers aren't required in all instances. And
yeah.
there is a screening requirement on this as well, and even with the screening requirement in place.
Yeah, because a screening requirement could be a fence or something. I just don't think that's.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in certain lot sizes, I could see it not being an issue, but certainly in the smaller lot sizes, I definitely see this as an issue. You gotta figure that all out. That you're not going into your setback with these things when you live on a smaller lot size.
Okay. Any other thoughts on just basically not touching this regulation? Is that the idea? That
I think so. I mean,
alone?
like I said, I'm just a little hypersensitive right now to trash because I think our town is looking terrible. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I actually think I agree. I don't think we should touch it at this point, especially with what's currently going on with the nightmare of the new trash service. So
well, I'm not the only one who thinks the trash is awful.
I think that's pretty much universal from what I've heard.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep moving. All right, erosion and sediment control. This is simple. There's just a little bit of redundancy here. There's some content in this section that we've got a separate section, more robust section with all the erosion and sediment control requirements. There's a little bit of redundancy. So we should really pare this down by getting rid of that redundant content, just referring over to that section. So just moving things to more appropriate places. Okay.
I'm okay with that. Sure.
Makes sense.
All right. Telecommunications, antennas, and towers. As you're all aware, Connecticut Siting Council has authority over these structures. We're not talking about your dish or on side of your house.
Yeah.
They have the authority. Some towns maintain fairly robust regulations as a means of trying to use that as a point of negotiation with the siting council. But ultimately the siting council does what they want to do.
Yeah.
So the question is, do we, these regs span a couple of pages. Should we just thin them out a little bit to touch upon some key points that are important regarding procedure? and just to explain how these are regulated, but otherwise remove things that you have no control over.
Yeah, I don't think we can really have
Yeah.
much to say about
Agreed.
this stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll come back to you with a recommendation for that.
But can I just ask, why do
Yeah.
some towns have them if there's nothing they can do?
Because they
Basically, so that they can
predated,
negotiate.
they
No?
predated the siting council's authority. They established them as cell towers were popping up everywhere, and before the siting council was given the authority that over local regulation. And so they had them, and then they just never cleaned them out. They just kept them, and they'll point to them to try to say, hey, this is really what we'd like to see. And, the siting council might say, all right, well, we'll try to accommodate you, but most instances, they're just going to,
Do what they
they're going
want.
to do what they do any other place.
Okay, because I mean, the only reason I'm even mentioning this is
Yeah.
if the siting council are, they say we'll try to accommodate you. Maybe they only do it 80% of the time or 20% of the time. If we don't have anything, there's nothing to accommodate.
So I think you're better off, instead of highly specific regulations, I think you're better off with a statement of purpose as to how you would like these to be located and buffered and screened and that sort of thing.
Okay.
With a just general statement of purpose. So you could point to that. The siting council is required to have a local public hearing before these things go into place. And that enables someone to go to the public hearing, whether you as a commissioner or resident say, hey, our regs say you're supposed to try to do some buffering and screening to mitigate the impact of these things. And they might say, all right, well, okay, well, we'll take a look at that. Right?
Okay. Okay.
And siting council does get referred to us, right?
Yeah.
It gets referred to the local level, like you said.
Yeah,
I've been to the siting. I had a project in front of the siting council once. It was hell.
Yeah.
But I know we did get a letter from the planning commission of the town it was in objecting to the project.
Yeah, and then you basically did it anyway, right?
They denied it.
Oh, okay.
Because they wanted to literally rip out 25 acres of wetlands and put
that's a separate issue.
Put solar panels in wetlands.
All right.
Well, no, and because everyone objected to it. I mean, there was a lot of town objections.
All right. That's okay. So we'll come back to you with the cleaned up version of this that is just a little tighter and a little more in the realm of the authority that you do have. All right. A couple other items. 1227. We've got a pretty big couple of paragraphs here on noise and vibration. This is under your performance standards. So now the question is what are your performance standards for? Like, what is the point? And I think it's multifaceted. There are at least two faces to your performance standards. On one side of them is that as you have an applicant come before you, and this is usually going to be a special permit type of use, as you have an applicant come before you, you can say, hey, you need to demonstrate that your project when constructed, when in use, is going to comply with our performance standards. And that's a condition of your special permit. And you need to do some homework to demonstrate how it's going to comply and that it will comply. That's one use. The other use, and this gets into a more complicated area, is the enforceability once that project is approved and it's operating. What happens if it's non-compliant? And theoretically, your performance standards would allow the ZEO to do enforcement. Although many of the standards that it has, whether it be noise and vibration or odors or whatever it may be, are things that's not easy for the ZO to measure and document. And so on the enforcement side, it can be a little less effective unless the town wants to hire someone to, if it's a real nuisance, they want to hire a technical professional to do some testing. So those are the two uses of the performance standards. The question is, whether or not your noise and vibration section, which gets real detailed, needs to be as detailed as it is, because the town does have a noise ordinance, which is pretty broad and general. It basically says you can't make loud noises between these certain hours, right? And whether or not your ordinance, which is enforceable by the police, is doing the job for you already. And this is just unnecessary redundancy that the ZO really, is not equipped to enforce. I think the benefit of having the standard there is you can require an applicant come in, if they're coming in manufacturing use and maybe they're near a residential zone, you could say to them, hey, is this thing going to make a lot of noise? And because we have standards for that. And can you demonstrate that this use is going to be within those standards, or that you're going to provide the soundproofing necessary to keep it within those standards? I think that's the value of it. If there were any changes if we keep this as written, and if there are any changes I would make to it, it's one small change, and that is your noise and vibration standard under 1227 provides a time of day standard that's matches the town's, except for on Sundays, where the town's standard is a little more restrictive for all you nice church-going people. And so I think the hours of restriction should match the ordinance, which just means providing a carve out for Sundays where it's a little more restrictive. That's the one change that I would make. But that being said, I'm interested in seeing if anyone has any thoughts on this.
So, how does this apply to building, the actual construction process?
Not the process. Yeah. Well, your town noise ordinance applies to the construction process, right? This 1227 is about the use that you're approving and not the construction process.
Okay.
Your town noise ordinance is applicable to construction activities.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. Anyone have thoughts on this? Should we just kind of keep it as it is, keep it tucked away there, and just make the time of day restrictions for Sunday consistent with your municipal ordinance?
Well, I don't think it should just be on Sunday, because sometimes I know we have discussion depending upon what it is. What are your hours of operation, not just on Sundays, but, all through the week.
So here's what it is, Lynn. It is the performance standards, the way it's written, it says noise levels in general shall not exceed a sustained level of 45 decibels in any district between 10 p.m. in the evening and 6 a.m. in the morning. That's the same time restriction that's in your municipal ordinance, except I think your municipal ordinance says on Sundays that extends until noon, right? So you got to be quiet all morning on Sundays.
Okay.
So there's just that small difference, a 2-hour difference. So I think if there's any change that we'd make to this, it would just be to make it consistent with your municipal ordinance in terms of that Sunday morning window.
Yeah, it gets rid of any ambiguity. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't want to be inconsistent. That's a bad thing.
Yep. I'm okay with that.
Okay, so we'll keep the reg here. We'll make that small change. That makes sense to everyone?
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, good. Just want to make that note. All right. Okay, we're making good progress. It's late, but we're making good progress. How does everyone, it's close to 8 o'clock. How does everyone feel about another solid half hour? Just let me try to work through it. You good with that?
Yeah, half hour. That's the max.
8:30. 8:30. Okay, so I need to keep things moving. All right, so this gets into the meat of really what we're focused on in this section, and I'll try to work through it quickly. And unfortunately, I realize I'm putting this in front of you for the first time. So what I need from you is, yeah, this sounds good. Go ahead and write it up, or if you see any red flags, bring that to my attention. Or if why are we touching this? Let's just leave it alone. Let me know. And I think if we take that approach, we'll get through this pretty quick. All right, this 15.3.8 are your site plan requirements. And we've got, we basically say all work connection to site plan has to be completed within 5 years. The issue is the statute on this has changed quite a bit, changed during COVID to allow for projects that were delayed because of COVID. And there's a range, and that range is like 5 to 10 years, depending on the type of project. And so really we should rewrite this to match what the statute allows.
But are they going to change the statute now that we're beyond COVID back to 5 years?
Because it applies to any project that was approved during a certain period. So they're not going to pull it back. They'll just keep it sitting there forever.
Okay.
All right. And then at the same time, I'd change, this is really about the expiration of the site plan. So I'd change the heading to expiration of site plan instead of validity, which is somewhat vague. That makes sense?
I think so.
And yeah, this would be anything going forward. Anything that's already been approved is still 5 years.
Well, this would definitely be applicable to anything that you're approving going forward, but it is actually, because the statute is written, it is applicable to anything that's already been approved.
Okay. Gotcha.
All right. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Next. Commission action on site plan or special permit. Once again, the expiration of a site plan or special permit is governed by timeframes provided by statute. And so we should remove the last sentence. And the last sentence reads, the Planning and Zoning Commission may issue permits and special use permits for limited duration, subject to adequate safeguard. The duration of those permits is of site plans and special use permits is governed by statute, not by any time constraints you put on it. The only thing you can limit in time is a zoning permit, which you can issue temporary zoning permits and zoning permits of all type. But this section is about site plans and special use permits. So we should get rid of that last sentence.
Okay, so we had something come up a few months ago.
Yeah.
Where they wanted to build I'm going to call it a garage. It wasn't a garage.
Yeah.
But it was temporary. It was to get them through a period of a less than 6 month period. And at that time, I said, okay, let's put that time frame in. And Clifton, you'll probably remember this. And you said, well, we really can't. And I said, but when we do the zoning rewrite, we want to have an out for things like this. When it's reasonable, it's a reasonable request for a minimum amount of time. And so for these people, we took them at their word. They said, we will definitely take this down in 6 months. We promise. So there's got to be a way that we can do this. Maybe we call it something else. I don't know. That lets us put, for a finite period of time. And this happens quite a bit for us. We get stuck. Yeah.
Okay. So I need to look into this to figure out how we could handle this situation. Typically, that's done, and I realize we're talking about something that you're approving through like a site plan application or a special use permit or something.
Yep, it was a special use permit.
Yeah, typically that's done, and so in those instances, you're still issuing a zoning permit. The site plan approval, special use permit, it then authorizes issuance of the zoning permit. I think through the zoning permit could be issued as a temporary permit. I think the conditions might be able to be placed on the zoning permit, but I need to confirm that.
Okay.
The problem with that, Francisco, is that these site plans and special use permits are recorded on the land records, whereas a zoning permit is not. So the only way I can feasibly think of doing what Lynn's at is if all of these decisions were left up to administrative approvals through staff.
Right.
So basically it would just take away any sort of temporary structure would have to be approved by the ZEO for a duration to be defined by the ZEO and basically taken out of the commission's hands.
Yeah, and that's exactly how I've seen it done, is through the zoning permit. Yeah.
Which we do already for things that are not site plan or special use permit.
Okay. But I expect that you, the commission, probably still want to see these and be able to approve them or deny them. And so we need to figure out how we can divorce the two.
Yeah. Right. Right. Clifton, you know which one I'm talking about, right? It was the workshop that couple. Yeah.
Well, and the problem, like I said, Lynn, and like Francisco said, is statute tells you how long a site plan or special use permit can be valid for. And in the case of a special use permit, it runs with the land.
Right.
And so basically if it's approved, it's permanent, quote unquote. In order to alleviate that, basically these applications wouldn't have to no longer be either a site plan or special use permit to circumvent statute.
So could we say something like if something is less than 1 year in use, it doesn't go to planning and zoning, it's taken care of by the zoning officer, something like that?
Yeah, if you created a use saying temporary structure and then set it to say a size, temporary structure under this total size, it could be approved administrative. It basically would be just a zoning permit application. And then I guess the language, Francisco, I think we'd have to look into this a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. But I do recall, Clifton, we said specifically we wanted to make sure that we addressed it during the rewrite process. Because our hands are tied, like you've pointed out, our hands are tied. Yep. Okay. Thank you.
And that's exactly why we're discussing it now. So, all right. And there are, and this is a very nuanced area, so I don't want to get too far into it. With special use permits, I mean, there are some expirations that can apply. It runs with the land, meaning that if the land is sold, whoever acquires it retains that right. It doesn't go away. So that's really what it's runs with the land is fixed to. But there are some conditions where there are expiration dates enabled by statute. But I mean, those are way longer than any sort of temporary time frame that you're thinking about anyway. So I think we need to dig into how this could be regulated through a temporary zoning permit. And it may be that there are instances where the zoning enforcement officer can refer it to you for review, and you're just providing a commentary to the zoning enforcement officer to assist them in their decision, and you're not actually approving a site plan or a special permit.
Oh, that sounds good. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
All right. We need to look into that. Okay. Changes and modifications to an approved plan or special use permit. So this section's a little messy. We should really separate minor changes from major changes, with the idea being that a minor change can be approved by the ZEO, and a major change goes to you and requires a new site plan filing and a full site plan review. Does that make sense? And that's how I've handled it in other communities. If it's minor, it can be approved administratively. You just need to document what you're doing. You don't have to redo your site plan, go for a new site plan approval. But if it's a major change, and we do our best to describe what constitutes a major and minor change, and to some extent that is in these regulations, but it really doesn't separate out the approval process between minor and major. Everything goes to you.
I think it makes sense just to separate them and allow Clifton and staff to, review and approve the minor kind of changes as defined here.
Everyone else agree? This is how I see it most often handled in other communities.
Yeah, I think this came up before, and that is one of the reasons why our current zoning meetings have part A, the first section where when we talk about things that we really don't have to vote on, we're always like, do we have to vote or not? And it was to kind of help people kind of get a hold of what kind of things come up that really we don't need to be part of the decision-making process, that, so I'm reading the last paragraph here as to what would be a minor and a major. And I just need a moment to like really read it.
Yeah, a minor change or a minor building renovation, any sort of improvements that do not significantly impact natural resources, drainage, traffic generation, parking, aesthetics or landscaping, buffers, etc. And a major change is anything that does impact any of those things.
Yeah. And what happens if, and we have a great staff, but who knows if we always will have that staff. They might move on to bigger and better things. Although I can't think of anything that would be.
Yes, I can't either.
But, if they determined that this wasn't considered major, but this is the whole point. They don't consider it major. We don't review it at all. We don't even know it's happened, right?
Yeah.
It's just happened. And then it comes back to bite us, right? It was considered major. What happens then? How does that all work?
Well, that's it. I mean, it's done. It's been approved.
It's been approved.
I think you just have to trust. I think you just have to trust the people that you have working for you.
Yeah. There can't be like an appeal process or something.
No, once it's been approved.
I know.
I think the solution here is to set the metrics of what is considered major, and if the commission sets whatever that metric is, whether it's size-based or,
Yeah.
What, at least there's a identifiable metric that, if the staff is operating outside of the scope, then it's clearly defined that the staff is operating outside the scope.
Yeah. All right, we could try to give that some shape.
Yes.
Yeah, to be considered. Yeah.
I mean, I
Okay,
understand the intent of it, which certainly makes sense, but I have been on the other side of it where the staff was allowed to approve something, and I'm like, that was kind of major, and we didn't even see it, and it came back to kind of bite us at the end. And I don't remember what it was. It was years ago.
Yeah, it wasn't this staff. Right,
Yeah.
right. I know what you're talking about.
Well,
Yep.
I'm not going to say it wasn't this staff.
So my question for you is this something you would like to see a recommended amendment on with, some constraints and really doing our best to describe what is minor versus major? Or is this just, dead on arrival for you?
I'd rather
I'm
you
not
spend your
adverse to it.
Yeah. I'd
I just
rather
want to
you
see it a
spend
little
your
fine-tuned.
time. Yeah, I'd rather you spend your time on the windows and the glazing.
Well,
Like,
you're getting
you-
getting all of it. So whatever you tell me what you want to advance and not advance, and that's what I do.
I think this is worth looking into. I do. And I think the key here is, to your point, Clifton, defining the parameters, what is major and what is minor.
That's the key.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll come back to you with a recommendation. Okay. This is simple administrative item 15.2.2, special use permit application requirements and procedures. We should provide language to make it clear that upon approval of a special use permit, the zoning permit is then issued by the ZEO. I mean, that's the way it works, but it's helpful to put that language right into the zoning regs to make it clear to the applicant how it works. Okay.
Okay.
Makes sense.
You don't take the special use permit and then go down to the building department and pull your building permit. Right? You get a zoning permit issued, and then you go down.
You're sort of laying out the steps for what they need to do, right?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Section 16, studies and statements. You can make, Connecticut statute allows you to have the applicant, developer, whomever, pay the cost of third-party reviews. There it is highlighted. That's the text from 81CB. You don't have anything in your regs that states that.
Really?
Under statute, you could presumably request that and say, hey, statute says we can do this. So, we're going to hire somebody and you need to agree to pay the cost if you want to move this application forward. It certainly helps if it's written into your zoning regs.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to call it out. Yeah.
I could have sworn it was written in there, but yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fairly common to regulations, and some towns do lean on this.
I mean, honestly, I'm surprised it wasn't. Like I said, I really thought it was already in there.
Yeah, at least if it is, I missed it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we want to make sure, I'll double check just to make sure it's not hidden somewhere. But point is, presuming it isn't in there, and then we should add it.
Of course they should pay.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the question is, do you want to have that authority for site plan applications and special use permits? Basically anything that comes before you?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, that was easy. Section 17, procedures. Architectural design review. So here you have a set of regulations that doesn't work as written, right? The procedure isn't as written. And we want to get it consistent with practice. So first of all, it starts with your detached ADUs, do they really need architectural design review? Can we take
I
these off
actually think it's very important for them to have a review. I mean, that is, in my mind, one of the key components to making sure the ADUs are going to work with the neighborhood, and the expansion of our regs to allow them, and you know, part of that is that, you know, architecturally they are in tune with the rest of the community there.
Now, you do require a special use permit for them, so it's for detached ones. So it's not like there isn't some form of review. I mean, it's coming before you. Does it really need architectural review?
I have a huge issue with architectural design review in general. So, I mean, I think it puts an undue burden on applicants because they are advisory. I think we just need to look at that whole committee in general. But no, I don't. I think we need to look at what they need, who needs to go before them.
So one of the issues is we have a bit of a conflict in language. Under exemption 1714, it says that architectural design review shall not be required for uses permitted by right. Well, this is permitted by right in residential zones and associated accessory uses. So there's already this kind of carve out for a lot of residential uses. However, you do require ADUs to be subject to review.
So it shall not be required for, but they are
for zoning permit uses, yeah.
I said, but it says that, but they are required for multifamily, but you can have a multifamily in a residential zoning district. And so what's the difference between multifamily and duplex and triplex residential units? Between A and
multifamily is 4 or more.
Do we define that as 4 or more, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just reading the Norwich regs today, so maybe I'm just confused.
Yeah, well, they all treat it differently, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So
I don't think we need, I think they should be exempt. I think everyone should be, I think everyone should be exempt. I mean, if they only need a zoning permit, why would we add this other level?
I think the reason, I think
we don't
the
really
reason,
even have to listen to what they say anyway.
But in that instance, you know, we don't have to listen to what they say, you know, for anything.
I don't mean that in a bad way, but we have our own, they still have to come to us. So do we, you know, so we can say to them, oh, we think you need more XYZ, more windows, more whatever. And it relieves them a little bit of that time.
Yeah,
administrative.
You're exactly right. Because a detached structure does require a special use permit, it's coming before you, and you can require a higher standard. You could do, you know, you're not obviously not going to get in the same level of detail that architectural design review would get into with respect to materials and siding and that sort of thing. But it is coming before you. You can impose
we do have
some
a bite
conditions.
at the apple.
Yeah, exactly.
Except what comes before us is basically a floor plan. I mean, you know, it's not, lots of times it's not even a full blown up plan for these ADUs, to be quite honest with you. I mean,
we could do that under what we've asked them to submit to us.
Yeah, a special permit requirement, you can ask for architectural drawings.
Yeah.
I mean, the question is, do we make them go to this other step, or we just say, like, we have enough? You know, honestly, with architectural design, we have the teeth. They don't. So,
Right. But
so we
I
could
would
say
be
like,
okay
you
with
can
that.
go there, but ultimately it's our decision anyway at the end of the day.
That is true. I think that lots of times, I think one of the reasons people go, we suggest they go there or they have to go there, is perhaps to generate an idea or to think of something that has not been thoroughly thought through, and they're professionals and they're going to think it through, in a realm that we might not understand, right? I think if we changed that you needed a full blown out, site plan and building plan, right? And, a rendition of what this is going to look like from the exterior with, as part of your application for an ADU, I'm okay with that. But it has to be one or the other. It can't be, you don't have to do that, nor do you have to go to the architectural review board.
No, they have to come to us. Still,
Yeah.
right?
But that's not part of our current, having that is not part of our current application for an ADU.
It is for a special use permit.
That they had to have a full rendition of what the ADU will look like?
Yeah, it's
I don't think so. The exterior, it is?
Well, under
Yeah,
under your special use permit
in the special
requirements,
use
you
permit.
have
Yeah.
you have architectural drawings are a requirement.
Yeah, they have to do all those plans. Yeah. Are we talking? We're talking about that at some point too, right? The requirements for all those.
Yes. We're
Okay.
I don't know if we're going to get there tonight, but yeah.
I don't think we can get there tonight. We've got
No.
6 minutes left. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's get through ADRB because we have a little more. All right. There's quite a bit on this page, but here's the thing. The procedures as written in the zoning regulations are not as they actually work. So by example, ADRB does not provide a report on the applications that come before them. Staff, staff provides you with meeting minutes that summarize the discussion, but there is no report. And so we should change the way the regulations are written to match the practice that is effective for you, or or the practice that you can actually administer and sustain. So there's that. There's also section 1716 provides a full list of submission requirements for architectural design review. However, all those requirements are required for the special use permit or site plan application anyway. So there's no need for a separate list because all those things are already being provided, and the full application is being referred over to design review. So we could get rid of that whole list of things as well. So I think there's just some cleanup that needs to be done on this section to match the way things actually work.
But the way things actually work is key. When they go to the architectural review board, do they have everything? Because I thought sometimes they go kind of, early on, and therefore they might not have everything that they need for the special use permit.
They have everything.
They do. Okay. All right. I just didn't know what came first. Okay.
Yeah. And then at the bottom of that page there on the right, 1719 describes submissions, and all of that is already described under the site plan and special use permit application process requirements. So there's unnecessary redundancy there as well.
Okay. Can I just ask, Clifton, are you happy with summarizing the ADRB, or should they be writing a report?
I don't think they have the capacity to write a report.
Okay.
So I find it easier to take the full minutes and then take whatever their comments are, and I just put that in my staff report for the commission.
Try to decipher that comment, Clifton, but
No
Yeah.
comment.
they don't have the capacity. Because they don't have staff. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And basically
I
it
thought you
would
meant
just
they didn't
be
have the
me
mental
writing a
capacity or
report
whatever,
on
but
their
yeah.
behalf, which I would just be copying their minutes, which is what I do in the report anyways.
So basically you're writing the report for them, but just making it into your staff report.
Correct. And I just take whatever's in the formal minutes and copy paste it over for you.
So you're
Okay,
good with the
let
way
me-
it currently works, Clifton, and you would be good with these changes to clear it up.
Let me
Correct.
just ask another quick question about the Architectural Design Review Board. So we have, in the past, when we've talked about, multifamily housing, et cetera, we have said we will put together design standards and that they would go in front of the Architectural Review Board. So that's what we've said. And I think Clifton, as a board, we've gone to Clifton and we've asked him to put together a proposal to get funding for doing, putting together some standards. So my question is, does it make sense that we're taking all this away from the Architectural Review Board? Because we're going to rely on them to ensure that these standards are being met. That's what we said all along. That's what, when we had our community outreach, they were very clear that there were some designs that were totally fine and other designs that weren't. And this was our way of meeting that need from the community. So does any of this affect that plan, that strategy that we've said we're going to put in place?
The short answer is no. The long answer is depending on the outcome of that process, should we get funding, etc. That process may later change this whole section all over again. It may require some significant changes to the structure of the ADRB. It may require significant changes to the structure of how staff reviews applications, how the commission reviews applications. It's such, as Francisco said when we came up with that recommendation, it's so large that it needs a separate contract itself to understand. So short answer, what we're doing now is not going to affect that process. The long answer is everything might be affected by the outcome of that.
Okay, so it makes sense to make these changes and then maybe...
Yeah, these changes won't impede us later on.
Okay. All right, I just want to make sure we're tying it all in. Okay.
Yep. Okay. All right, I have one more slide in this section. It's going to be a quick one, and then we'll talk about our next steps, look at our next meeting date. Zoning Board of Appeals, we just need to update this. We should have caught this in phase 1, but didn't. The locational approval of auto sales and service establishments, the legislature changed how this works 3 separate times over a period of a dozen or so years. And it now, again, rests with the ZEO to sign off on these and not ZBA. And we properly identify the ZEO in section 5.3.3, but this language got left under the ZBA authority that they approve. So it just needs to come out. That's it.
Makes sense.
Okay. All right. So there are a couple items I wanted to address. We'll just push it off to the next meeting. To talk about fees, your fees for zoning permits and building permits, all that, it needs to be updated. And Clifton had recommended like merging the zoning permit and building permit fees into one schedule. And your council sets the fees, or your board of selectmen sets the fees.
Yeah, I was on the board when we reset them last time, and it goes to a board of selectmen vote.
Exactly. So the
It might
idea
actually
is
go
that,
to, it might go to town vote, I think, actually.
okay. The idea is that we'd make a recommendation that they take a look at this and
Is that right,
maybe
Clifton?
update
I
them.
think it goes to town meeting.
It does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. There you go. So it would just be a matter of us making a recommendation you could deliver to them and say, hey, you guys should put this on bring it to town meeting,
It
next
goes to
town
town
meeting.
meeting,
Yeah. Okay. So let me skip ahead. We did have a staff recommended zone change. We'll talk about it at our next meeting. My screen is freezing for whatever reason. Can you still see my screen?
yeah. Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
It's
Mine
it.
grayed out. I don't know why.
Oh.
So our next steps.
What was the staff recommended zone change? Do we not get to know what that is?
Well, it's 8:33.
Okay. I just want to make, so just one quick thing. So at our last meeting, we were talking about the Lord's Point rezone. Is that what you're talking? Is that it?
No. All right, let me show it to you.
No, it's okay. Because remember Clifton with that RC 120 thing at the Lord's Point?
Yeah, that's separate.
But is that coming up? Is that part? Because we said let's throw that in here as well.
Yeah, I have to work on it separately.
Okay. No, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure that didn't get sort of lost in the shuffle.
And we're not gonna talk about, we made the change that the regular everything in Lord's Point, we were not going to change.
Oh, we took that off a long time ago, Lynn.
Yeah, no, this is just that weird
I just wanted to make sure we weren't backtracking that. Okay.
No, this is just that weird RC 120 zone.
Okay. Yeah.
That Keith was talking about last time he was there.
Okay.
Okay, so I've just pushed off this discussion. It's a real small area, and it'll make sense to you once we explain it. We'll just talk about it next month.
Okay.
So our next steps.
That's okay.
I've got a draft amendments for everything that we discussed, including revisiting a couple of those amendments, like the buffer area amendments. So I've got to draft all those, prepare those for our next discussion. And then also, as I mentioned, really start to go through, our 40 or so recommended amendments, and start to kind of organize those for our discussion next month. And our meeting next month scheduled for June 25th.
Great. I know I missed a meeting. Did we talk about, I think when we talked, did we talk about site plan requirements and that section?
No, not yet. No.
Oh, is that coming up?
So I would say this, and we haven't developed any recommendations to any changes as of yet to site plan requirements. It is definitely under the scope of work that we're doing right now. So if you have any thoughts on that, things that we should be looking at or recommendations, please share those with Clifton so he could send them on to me.
My only one thought is get rid of the requirement for the shadow plan.
Oh, yeah.
No one does it. No one knows how to do it.
Okay. We've got a whole section on shadow plan. It's a big section.
Yes, and I mean, I've had to submit them. That we call them the Batwing plans because that's what they look like.
Yeah.
But no one does. Like Clifton, have you ever seen one come through?
We've only really done it once or twice, and that's for the large attached housing multi-family.
Yeah, but for subdivisions, they're required for the type 2 site
Correct.
plan.
Yeah, we don't do it for anything.
And honestly, as an engineer, like I had to teach, no one knows how to do them.
It's a little easier to do now if you model it.
Right, but
it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, and it's just like it all depends on.
And this is something we would be discussing in an upcoming meeting, Francisco.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying.
That's
we could take them out. That's
We could put this on our agenda next month. It's going to be.
Thank you.
We've got a lot to talk about next month, and I'm happy to put it on the agenda to look at it a little closer. what we need to do next month is we need to go through 40 plus recommended amendments and basically, as I said earlier, triage them. Yes, definitely, we like that. Let's move it ahead. Put it aside. We don't need to talk about this. Other ones, no, that is dead in the water. Let's just dump it now. And then what are the stuff in the middle? What do we do with it? That's what we need to do.
Yeah, I'm good. And can we just say,
I'd like to recommend that we make that meeting a
3
longer
hours.
meeting and just schedule it to be longer. Yep.
I was going to say the exact same thing, Lynn. Let's just say we're going till 9.
I was going to offer that as well. I think we need a plan for that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
All right,
Perfect.
great.
All right.
Excellent,
Thank you,
thank
everyone.
you.
That was an
All right.
incredibly
Thank you,
productive
Francisco.
meeting. I appreciate
Thank you,
it.
everybody, for staying over. Appreciate it.
Sure. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.